setting up and configuring a DHCP server on a computer. So to set up DHCP, again, we're going to have to add a role. So we go to add roles and features in Server Manager. We choose role-based or feature-based because we're doing it on this computer. We select the computer name, and this time we're going to select DHCP server and add all the optional features. The rest is just clicking through next until you get to the install button and letting it install in the background. Again, this won't take very long. Should be under a minute to install the DHCP role. So we'll just wait for it to finish. It's 3/4 already. We'll just wait for that last little bit to finish. And it is done. Feature, installation, configuration is required, of course, because we have to set up the DHCP server, but the installation was successful. So if we click on close, you can see that yes, we have our DHCP server here on the left, but again it tells us that we need to configure DHCP. So that we go back to tools and we select DHCP from the tool list, which will open up the DHCP manager. And this will then allow us to configure our DHCP server. So what are the things that we need to configure on the DHCP server? There are two main things that we need to configure. The scope, which we're going to look at just now, and if we have any reservations or exclusions. So let's do it the scope first. So again, I select my computer name, and you can see we've got both IPv4 and IPv6. Now, we're not playing with IPv6, so we're going to create an IPv4 scope. Okay, so they say here, before DHCP server can issue an IP address, you must create a scope and then also authorize the DHCP server. The scope is the range of IP addresses that is assigned to computers requesting a dynamic IP address, and authorization is a security precaution that ensures only authorized DHCP servers can run on your network. Okay, so how do we first of all add the scope? We go here to the right where we got the action menu. We click on more action and we say we want to create a new scope. This brings up the new scope wizard, where the first thing it asks us is, what is your scope name? Now I'm going to call it the same as my domain, Andre.test. You can call it whatever. If it's a scope for the sales office, call it the sales scope. If it's a scope for the IT department, call it the IT scope. If it's a scope for the building, the one building, call it building A scope. Again, give it a meaningful name so that 5 years down the line, you can still remember what was the scope created for in the first place. Okay, so we give it a name. We can give it a description if we want. We click on next. Then, what is the first IP address that the scope can give out? So we start with the start IP address. Let's say it can start at 0.10. And what is the end IP address? What is the last IP address that this scope can give out? Let's make it 100. Okay, so if it can give out .10 all the way to .100. Then it will ask you what is the subnet mask. It should automatically fill it in. So we click on next. Then we can add any exclusions. An exclusion is an IP address that you do not want to give out. So maybe that IP address has already been assigned statically to a computer, like I did with 150. Hey, so I can add that address. Of course, it won't work because 150 is not part of my scope. Hey, my scope ends at 100. But I can say, don't give out IP address 50. Exclude that address. The reason is I gave that address to a router in my network. So I don't want you to give out that address to any other computer. So we can add as many exclusions as we want. We can also add a range of exclusions between two numbers. So I can go from 20 to 25, and it won't give out that range of IP addresses as well. Okay. So once we've added our exclusions, we then have to give our lease time. How long does a computer keep its IP address? By default, it's 8 days. If you're in a corporate environment, it might actually be good to change this to 1 day. Okay. Or maybe even 8 hours. Not even a day. Let's just say no. You can only keep your IP address for 8 hours. Okay. So that's your lease time. After you set your lease time, then you can ask, do you want to configure extra options? Remember I told you that DHCP does not just give out IP addresses, it can also give out other settings. So yes, we do want to configure that. We want to specifically also add our default gateway address. So they can also give out the IP address of the router. Okay? So we add that. Then, do we want to add a DNS server? Yes, we do want to add a DNS server. Hey, and the DNS server IP address was 192.168. Oh, it already picks it up for us. Fancy. You can see already picked up our DNS server. Hey, so that's good. So we can say next. Do we have a Win server? No, because we're not running NetBIOS. And then lastly, do we want to activate the scope? Remember, we have to activate it before the server can actually start giving out IP addresses. So we'll say yes. I want to activate the scope right now. And we'll say next. And then finish. And then all of a sudden, now we have a new scope called Andre.test. I can see the addresses that I can give out, plus exclusions. If I go to address leases, this will be the addresses that the computer has given out already. Of course, the server has not given out any addresses, so there's nothing in there. If I go to reservations, I can reserve an IP address for a certain MAC address in my network. Scope options, these are the 3 other things that the DHCP server gives out as well. And lastly, if we look at policies, these are the rules that I can create for certain things. You know, this computer can only get it from this scope, and that computer cannot get one at all. Whatever I want to set up. But that's how easy it is to set up a DHCP server and actually add a DHCP scope to your network. Okay. The next section, the next little video, of course, is now going to cover adding a computer to the domain and then letting that computer get an IP address from the DHCP server and update its records in DNS. So you guys can see how all of that is also